Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank Goldie for inviting me here to speak today and to congratulate her for the remarkable empire that she's built with Scoop News Group. She's an entrepreneur and a role model, and I am so grateful to know her. In a letter to a friend, British Foreign Secretary Sir Austen Chamberlain wrote, "Many years ago, I learned from one of our diplomats in China that one of the principal Chinese curses heaped upon the enemy is, 'May you live in an interesting age.' Surely," he wrote, "no age has been more fraught with insecurity than our own present time." Chamberlain wrote this letter in 1936, but it might as well have been written today because we're living in very interesting times and our future is unwritten. More importantly, the future is ours to write, and the amazing men and women of the cybersecurity industry will play a vital role in determining what that future looks like. Now, before we get into what that role might be, let's set the context by talking about the world we live in, the forces shaping this world, for better and for worse, and the shared privilege and obligation of the cybersecurity industry. Now, I'm a science fiction fan and loved Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. The premise of Foundation is that humanity is on a path to self-destruction. A group of psychohistorians led by Harry Seldon decide that if they can change that trajectory just by a few degrees, then maybe they can buy enough time to work on getting humanity back on track and on a path to peace and prosperity. Now, we don't have a galactic empire to contend with, but a straight line to the future just doesn't feel particularly good right now. Our world is increasingly divided, increasingly complex, and it's buckling under the weight of the complexity and divisiveness. We feel it every day in our lives, in our communities, at work, at home, and sadly, even in our schools. Now, there are a number of forces driving this complexity, and I want to highlight three. First, the pace of technology innovation and our inability to deal with its consequences. Second, widening income inequality. And third, the loss of power and effectiveness of social institutions. Now, let's start with the pace of technology innovation. There was a time when humans had centuries to adapt to revolutionary technology. Gutenberg's printing press took 200 years to have a global impact. We had time to adapt and adjust, to establish social norms, and to make sure that the good it served far outweighed the bad. We had 200 years to adjust to the agricultural revolution of the 17th century. We had 100 years to adjust to the industrial revolution of the 19th century. We had 70 years to adjust to the technology revolution of the late 19th and early 20th century. We had 40 years to adjust to the scientific revolution of the mid-20th century. And as you can see, time to adapt has condensed over time. And today, we don't have the luxury of time anymore. We live in the age of acceleration, to borrow a phrase from Thomas Friedman, where for the first time in human history, the pace of technology innovation is outpacing our ability as humans to adapt. Today, the artificial intelligence revolution, the genetics revolution, and the energy revolution are all happening simultaneously, following quickly on the heels of the IT or internet revolution of the 1990s. And the problem with this pace of change is that our civic institutions, our political processes, our legal and regulatory frameworks do not have the agility it takes to thrive in this world. Now, more on this in a second. The second force I want to touch on is the widening income divide. Driven in no small part by technology innovation, income inequality is widening globally. According to a McKinsey Global Institute study, almost half the people in advanced economies believe that the average person is worse off today than 20 years ago, and they do not have faith that their children will be better off than they are. Income inequality is the world's highest in the United States, with 70% of US households, 70%, that's 90 million households, experiencing declining income for the past 15 years. Now, these numbers are pre-COVID, and COVID has only amplified the income gaps and economic inequality. The ever-widening economic divide is polarizing our society and has led to the rise of both authoritarian candidates and socialist candidates in the United States, for example. A polarized society does not have shared values or shared vision. It is tribal. There is no common ground. We see this shift in every aspect of our lives. the rise of populism and demagoguery, volatility and gridlock in government, the effective use of influence over might, of insurgency over traditional warfare, the fast descent of splinter factions in religion and in politics, the frighteningly effective use of information and influence operations, the frighteningly ineffective ability of global powers to develop multilateral agreements around our most pressing issues, including security and cyberspace, and the fundamentally unstable and asymmetric security landscape where minor actors can cause massive harm and undermine social stability of global powers. Which leads me to the third force I want to touch on, the loss of power and effectiveness of social institutions. In 1992, Harvard sociobiology professor E.O. Wilson famously said, "The problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, and it is terrifically dangerous, and it is now approaching a point of crisis overall." 80% of Americans do not trust their government, 80%. And only 3% believe they can trust government to do what is right all the time. Now you think I might be referring to a post-Trump presidency poll, but I'm not. According to the Pew Research Center, erosion in public trust began in the 1960s and has been at its lowest for over a decade, from the end of the Bush presidency through the Obama presidency. This data was released in 2015, and I'm confident that it has not improved since then. Our inability to establish social norms of behavior in the face of rapid technological innovation and disruption, coupled with economic collapse for a broad segment of society, has caused our trust in our civic and political institutions to have our best interest at heart, or can even be relevant in the age of acceleration, to erode. This, coupled with the complete abdication of responsibility by news media and content platforms to present us with facts, has led to a society that is not only deeply polarized, but also disconnected and mistrusting of government and its leaders. So what does all of this mean for us, for our industry, and our role as cybersecurity professionals in righting what is wrong? Let there be no doubt. There is a global contest of values and ideas being fought, and it is being fought in cyberspace. These scenes in our society, polarization, tribalism, income inequality, are being exploited by persistent and focused adversaries in cyberspace. China and Russia, while playing distinctly different games, have the same end game: the use of information warfare to limit free expression, erode the integrity of civic and political institutions, reduce our economic strength, and ultimately undermine the very foundations of Western liberal democracy. The amplification of polarization as the result of the structure of technology platforms, especially Facebook and Twitter, as well as exploitation of those platforms by our adversaries to sow discord and chaos in society, has further undermined the effectiveness, stability, and consistency of our government leaders and policymakers to address these pressing problems and to find common ground to rally around as a society with shared values and a shared vision for the future. Winston Churchill famously said, "A pessimist sees difficulty in every situation, in every opportunity. The optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty." I'm an optimist. Our industry has a shared opportunity to be the psychohistorians that save our galactic empire. Because every aspect of our lives is operationalized in cyberspace, it means that we are the frontline defenders of the universe. Protecting people, protecting systems, protecting democracies, protecting humanity starts and ends with protecting cyberspace. In the absence of a well-functioning government, in the absence of well-defined norms of behavior, in the absence of a consistent policy of engagement, escalation, and deterrence, it is up to us to defend our organizations, to defend our people, to defend our country, and to defend our democracy, to defend the concept of truth and facts in the face of those who wish to do us harm. The opportunity we have is to stand up against the malfeasance taking place in cyberspace, to call it out, to educate people, and to stop it where we can. Another great quote from Professor E.O. Wilson is that people would rather believe than know. Think about that. People would rather believe than know. To write the course of history, people need to know what is going on in cyberspace. And armed with that knowledge, we can begin to end the malfeasance that's taking place online. As we do this, our shared obligation is to recognize that our industry has negative unemployment, that our skills, whether they're technical, legal, business, policy, strategists, futurists, are in demand, and that our economic future is secure. More importantly, we must acknowledge that this bright future for cybersecurity professionals must be shared with as broad a segment of the population as possible. As we build our teams, as we build our culture, we cannot lose sight of today's painful economic realities. We have an obligation to build inclusive companies, inclusive cultures, inclusive teams, and we must think expansively about how we train and motivate people to join our ranks. To be effective in carrying out our mission, we must attract a diverse skill set to the industry. We must attract people who think differently, who come from different backgrounds and from around the world. In Foundation, Harry Seldon estimates that he has 300 years to save the galactic empire before it collapses into a 30,000-year dark age. We don't need 300 years to put humanity back on the right path. We don't have 300 years to end the abuses taking place online that undermine our companies, that manipulate our friends, our family and colleagues, and amplify the polarization that exists in society. Every person who works in this industry, whether you work in the public or private sector, can choose to take a leadership role in saving humanity from self-destruction. In the past year, we've seen government agencies working closer together and with private sector to stop our adversaries in cyberspace, both in the US and across the world. NSA, FBI, DHS are putting out joint advisories on a more regular basis to inform cyber defense. Cyber Command has been deploying its strategy of persistent engagement effectively. Their work against the Russians during the 2018 midterm elections was inspiring and continues today. NSA has stood up the Cybersecurity Directorate to defend national security systems, our defense industrial base, and by extension to eradicate our adversaries in cyberspace. Sector-specific agencies such as Treasury and Energy are working closely together and sharing information and best practices to better protect their sectors. Venture capitalists invest about $9 billion annually into cybersecurity innovation, and our companies' valuations are soaring on the public markets because we're bringing important solutions to the market. Microsoft is actively working to bring down any actors that are exploiting its technologies and its platform. Google and Amazon are actively contributing to the security community and taking on the responsibility of securing their platforms. Thousands of entrepreneurs are working tirelessly to evolve our defense posture. We are rising to the challenge and we're making a difference, but we need to do it faster and we need to do it with purpose. It's time for stunning leadership. Be stunning in how you lead us, in how you lead your teams, your companies, your agencies to a more resilient, more secure, and more just world. Thank you.